Corey Bellamy,
Present.
Timothy Meyer,
Present.
Karen Powell,
Present.
Arthur McKee,
Present.
Will Pribble.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Madam Secretary. And having a quorum and seeing that everybody's here, this time I'd like to ask if everybody has received the minutes, and then if you've received the minutes, have you had a chance to review them? And is there anything that you would like to revise?
For the record, on the minutes, the 24th, it indicated that Karen Powell was chair and president, but you brought the meeting to order as chair. So could we just clarify that to make sure that, are they serving in co-chair, or how is that? The minutes.
I'll be happy to make that change to Timothy. Okay. I have it kind of as a template, and sometimes I overlook that. So thanks for catching it, and I will get that fixed.
Yeah, I just want, just for record purposes, I think we just want to make sure.
Thank you, Mr. McKee. I noticed that as well. And then I had one other change I think I'm right about. If you go to the third page of the notes, or the minutes rather, and you look at the first paragraph, third line, it might just be a technical thing. I don't know, but the word fees is used, and I think it's supposed to be fines and not fees. And I think there is probably an appreciable difference if that is actually the case.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have a motion on the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to accept the minutes with the required changes.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Like sign opposed. Okay, the ayes have it, minutes are passed. Let's see, looking at the agenda, and I don't see any old business. Madam Secretary, could you call the next item of business?
I assume that we are starting with my packet did not have an agenda for the minutes. So I don't have the agenda in front of me. So I assume we are starting with 150 Landings Drive.
So let me ask you this.
Yes.
That, Tim, was the old business, the appeals itself? Maybe I'm interpreting it wrong. Is that old business, the appeals and itself? Is that considered?
I don't know technically how that's considered. I mean, it seems like old business, right? But it's categorized under the appeals section.
I don't know. That's why I'm trying to.
Aren't they all appeals? Everything we hear is an appeal, so it would only be something that's new to be brought before the board, as opposed to what we had decided before.
To be fair, we have dragged this one along for several meetings now, so
Yeah,
it's kind of old business, but it's an appeal that's been pushed down the road, so to speak.
Okay.
So,
all right. Thank you.
Okay, and then Madam Secretary, you were correct. That is the first item of business as I see it on my agenda. Really, the appeal related to 150 Landings Drive. Is there a staff report for this appeal?
Yes, all the staff reports were in your packets.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, before we have the city speak, would it be appropriate to have all parties that are going to render testimony to do a swear in or affirm their testimony?
Yes, I believe that would be appropriate. Madam Secretary, at this time, could you swear in all the parties that would offer testimony on these matters?
If you are going to offer testimony on these matters, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
Yes.
I do.
I do.
Would you mind stating your name for the record, please?
Chris Ardell, I do.
Michael Marcini, I do.
Trey Troxel, I do.
Thank you, Mr. Bellamy, for that clarification. Okay. Unless anybody else has any thoughts about how to proceed at this time, my thought at the moment is to ask, I believe it was Mr. Marancini, for his report regarding 150 Landings Drive.
Since this
I
is,
think last time we made a motion to consider all of them together. I don't know if that would be appropriate here or if that would make things easier or not.
We did do that last time, and it made sense, and I agree with it last time as well. And then as we moved through it, my recollection was that the issues became a little muddled together because the properties were at different stages. There were slightly different issues associated with each one, and I think and this is my opinion here, I think it might make for a slightly cleaner record if we go through property by property, even if it is a bit more
No problem.
tedious.
No problem. Thanks.
You're welcome. Mr. Marancini, could you proceed, please?
for the 150 Landings Drive, do you want me to read the background in full again?
I don't know if that'll be necessary. I think
Okay. The changes
could.
since the last meeting
Yeah.
was on September 1st, a second citation was issued per the Code Enforcement Board. And then November 15th, a follow-up inspection was conducted and found the building appeared to have no visible changes since the last meeting, which was the decorative features like the soffits underneath the gutters and stuff. Around the windows, they put new windows in, but they did not seal around the windows. And as of today, that still had not been done.
If I can interject, or I mean, I guess I'm.
Wait, whoa, Mr. Arnold, wait one moment. Please let Mr. Marastini finish, and then we'll have a question for Mr. Marastini, and then we'll proceed to you.
Can you all see my screen?
I can.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. This is pictures from today. Sorry, when I share my screen, I cannot see y'all anymore, so. But the recommendation that we're making, because of no changes on those items since the last time, would be to issue a third citation, which would be for $1,200, which is in the nuisance code, and not making a recommendation on waiving the past two citations for a total of $1,200.
Is that 1,200 in addition to the previous 400 and 800?
Correct. The 400 is citation number 1, 800 citation number 2, and the 1,200 would be a third citation to be issued.
So a question for you, Mr. Marasini. So when we met last time back in August, I believe, looking at the meeting notes here, Mr. Ardle had represented that he'd gone out or he had work done that afternoon right before our board meeting. Windows have been replaced, replaced an interior door, an exterior door had been replaced. Did you see that those things have been completed?
Yes, the windows have been replaced, but they have not been finished. Like, they are put in place, they have not been sealed around the edges. I can pull those pictures back up if you'd like.
No, that's okay. Unless you want to show something in detail.
No, let's see, I can go back here. So if you look, like right there, you have soffits, like where the gutter's missing, it's rotten. That falls under decorative features. And then along right there. And then if you look at those top windows, you can see the black gaps. So that is what I was looking at today.
Okay.
And along the front of the building right there, around those windows also.
Mr. Marasini,
There-
what was the driving force originally when you first went to the property? Was it from a citizen raising concern, or was it just you're driving through? Can you remind me?
Multiple
started this?
complaints.
Multiple complaints. Are those complaints continuing since our initial hearings?
I want to say yes, just because whenever we're out there, people will make comments. But I think since we've been over there, our presence has been there, and we've put the red placards up on the buildings and stuff. Phone
Yep.
calls have kind of slowed down.
Sure. And I've had a chance to go by the properties myself, just to see first person, and in comparison to the street, I can only imagine the complaints coming from those that have to drive by it. So from my perspective,
And this building is also occupied.
yeah, I have my views. I will save them pending the Mr. Ardell's rebuttal.
What are the criteria for demolition for, well, what is the criteria,
next
the main
question.
criteria?
I will have to get back to you on that. That mainly comes from our director, Eric Cockley.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Marasini?
I'm interested to hear from Mr. Ardell.
Okay, at this time then, Mr. Ardle, you've been sworn in. Do you have anything to address the board with concerning 150 Landings Drive?
Yes, so, which some of this is 150 specific. Some of it, I guess, is tied to all three of the properties. So like you said, 150 does have tenants in place. 150 is also the one that needs the least amount of work. And so, again, from kind of our previous meetings, they're working on the two upstairs units. So those are the ones that, as of, I guess the last meeting, I know there's been a couple postponements, but as of the last meeting, they had kind of done some work, working on rough framing, and then doing those windows, which had, most of them had just been installed. Since then, I guess the biggest thing as far as the exterior goes is that the two front exterior doors on the upstairs units have been replaced. So those are new, those are completely sealed. Those are like they'll end up. The two exterior back doors have both also been replaced, new handles, new doors. trimmed out, siliconed, sealed all those. Again, the downstairs ones they're not working on, from, I guess, talking to inspector previously, and then also because there's a tenant in place, those are not getting worked on currently. So the majority of the work, I guess, on 150 has been interior wise. Like I said, this kind of goes for the bigger picture. But since we last spoke, the rehab draw line has been open. I know they were kind of struggling with it, and they ended up having to actually completely start the application. And so as of October 27th, that was officially opened. And so I had a meeting shortly after that with the two, I guess, partners of VDC and their bigger concern. So, I guess the short version is on 150, there was 3 violations, and, they certainly are planning on, getting a fine for the decorative features, which is the soffit and fascia that they were pointing out. The challenge was that they had talked to the contractor, and the contractor essentially said, a bit of cutting off, our nose to spite our face. And so, like, the trim for the windows, for instance, they kind of said, okay, well, we're going to charge you to get scaffolding, put trim on the window, seal it, do that. And then later in the future, we're going to have to come back, set up scaffolding again, do painting, do additional silicone and stuff. And so it kind of became a matter of, do you want to pay twice for the same thing? And so just based upon, which again, I didn't have it broken down per building, but essentially the cost for the soffit and fascia repairs for 150, 154, and 160 came out to, which was soffit and fascia repairs, the roofs that need to be replaced on 154 and 160, and then the gutters on 150 came out to around 24,000. So like I said, I had a meeting with VDC. They spoke to the same contractor who, of course, was kind of advising it doesn't make sense to do something and then have to come back later to redo it. And so that same 24,000 cost would be about 31,000 is what they had said. If they kind of did it in 2 stages, going in, putting the trim in, doing part of it, and then coming back later. And so VDC had kind of said, the problem is their frustration is that they're spending a ton of money. Like I said, the draw was opened October 27th, and in the next about a week, $46,943.87 of checks were paid out. And unfortunately, 11,000 of that was for 150. And so their frustration was that they're spending a ton of money and they're not any closer to getting tenants in, which is the only way to start, minimizing the loss and generating income. And so when I had that meeting with them, it was shortly after, the draw was open. So it would have been probably beginning of November. They had, kind of said, let's just focus on, kind of the big things, their concerns were the security issues. So all of which this was done probably a month and a half before that, but all of the doors and windows at 154 and 160 were boarded up. But they essentially said, if it doesn't involve security, safety, or health, let's kind of put it on the back burner. And so their focus on 150 has been inside. So they've had drywall repairs done. There's been some painting done. They did some subfloor repairs. And then I think December 4th, I believe, is when it's set up. They've got someone coming in to install the flooring, which is kind of the last big project. And so their goal, potentially as early as mid-December, for sure, kind of by January 1st, they're planning on having the 2 upstairs units ready to rent at 150. And so 150, their focus has been kind of interior, because again, their goal is to get it to where they can get some tenants in there so that they can start minimizing the loss, because their concern, again, I know obviously this project has been going on bigger picture. But their concern is that with the fines kind of doubling and doubling and doubling, is they're going to get to a point where you just can't catch up. And the problem is it's a substantial amount of work that needs done. And like I said, they've spent, since the draw was open, almost 50,000. And the majority of that was for projects that don't really bring tenants and income any closer. And so their concern is that they're going to run out of money before they can do anything, which I don't think does them any good. And again, I also don't think it does the city any good. I know there's been talk about demo. Again, as someone who previously was a general contractor, I think it's crazy to consider tearing those down. I mean, they certainly need a lot of work, but the cost to rebuild them would be about $1 million. And they would be worth probably at that point about $790 to $850. And so it just becomes kind of a matter of what's the goal. And so, like I said, I had sat down and had about a 2.5-hour meeting with VDC, and they kind of said, at some point we have to kind of cut our losses. The doors have been redone, the windows are all new, so let's focus on the interior so we can get tenants in there and get them rented. Fortunately or unfortunately, the soffit being done, the window trim being done, that doesn't really affect whether they can put a tenant in the unit. But the floors and cabinets and drywall and all of those things do. And so, again, I know, they're aware that the decorative feature, which will be the same actually for all 3 buildings, certainly that will still be in place, but I guess based upon our last meeting, I think pretty much every other kind of area or, violation has been resolved. So I don't know if there's a way to get those, kind of individual violations broken down. But, they're aware that the soffit's not done. They, I guess, actively made the decision to kind of focus on the interior rather than continuing to spend, additional money on the outside. But like I said, all of the, exterior doors.
Sorry,
front
Mr. Ald, I was on mute there. I was trying to talk. I think I've gotten. I don't know if I can speak for the rest of the board, but I think I've gotten what you're saying and what the owners have agreed to do here. I see Mr. Marasini has a point or something to say here, so I'd like to give him the opportunity.
I just want to add on to, kind of respond to what he's saying about.
Yes, you may.
The exterior does not matter to get tenants in there. It actually does, because a rental inspection has to be performed and has to be approved. If it is disapproved and they move somebody in, then they get an additional fine for each unit.
Okay, thank you for that.
I guess from my previous, again, I do those for any of the rental units I have. I guess I didn't realize that had exterior. I guess I wasn't aware that the exterior elements mattered with that inspection. But I think if that's the case, I can certainly relay that to VDC. And obviously, at some point they're planning on replacing it anyway. And again, I don't think they want it to look like that once it has tenants in there. But again, ultimately they're trying to minimize kind of the loss and start getting to where they have some sort of income coming in.
Mr. Ardell, may I interrupt you? Are they budgeting to pay all these fines and the ones that they may incur in addition to this if they don't get it fixed?
Yes and no. They certainly, obviously don't necessarily know what that amount is. Again, a lot of, I guess, the behind the scenes, I'm not necessarily included on. I guess the bigger picture, and again, like I have kind of a secondary connection because I've got my own properties. I don't know what their intention is. I don't know what it is. I certainly know that they have concerns that with the fines kind of doubling each time, I think where they're at is they're trying to figure out how can we pause the bleeding so that we can kind of do this in the proper order, because it also doesn't do them good. There was, I think, 3 exterior doors that were installed on 154. And the contractor's already said that because of some repairs to the subfloor that are needed, all 3 of those doors are going to have to be completely removed later and then reinstalled. So it's going to end up costing about 215%. And so, of course, that was one of the things that they just kind of said at some point, we can't just fix items to fix the violation. We have to do it in a proper order.
Well,
And
Mr. Ardell, you've got to understand what our job is, and we can't really take into consideration what their plans are. What we see is violations, and that's the only thing that we have to go on.
Understood. And again, I don't know, where it is. I know they're concerned about the, kind of mounting fees. My concern, I know they've already reached out to a bankruptcy attorney. And so my concern is that they're have a high enough level of concern about kind of the mounting fees that it's going to become a cost prohibitive project, that they've at least had that discussion. And again, like I said, I have kind of my own properties. And so I guess, what my fear is that if it continues down the same road, regardless of, what interior progress they've made, regardless of whether there's tenants in place, if the exterior, item fines continue, again, if they end up declaring bankruptcy and the property's foreclosed, I don't think that does anyone any good. Like I've reached out to some other real estate investors I know. I've got people that are interested. They're concerned, and I don't know, I mean, this may be a totally separate conversation. I've got someone that essentially has cash in hand to purchase the buildings. Their concern is that—
Can we limit the conversation based on the citation and not all of the other issues, please?
I hear that, but I guess the reason I'm mentioning it is their concern is that they're hesitant to buy the properties because they're afraid they're going to step in and there's already these citations in place and they don't want to start from day one trying to play catch up from a year and a half. And so—
Well, there's already citations in place. They will step in and be required to pay those citations.
Sorry, no, in my perspective too, we've been gracious in terms of our allotment of time to do this. We've heard repeatedly efforts being made financially and on the contractor front, and I'm at the end of mine at this point, so I have nothing left to hear. I think we've given plenty of chance to make right the issues that have been raised, and so I make a motion that we move this into the final phases, whatever the next phase of the property. If we're referencing just 150, if the same apply, we can handle them individually. But
Well, okay, but there's a motion on the table, and I hear there's a second. Before I entertain discussion, Mr. Bellamy, I caught you raising your hand a few minutes ago. Did you have something that you wanted to say, or did you already say it?
I would like to proceed with the vote.
Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion?
We are talking about property 150 only at this time?
Yes,
this time.
150 only.
Okay, I agree.
So I'm going to need some clarification. Mr. Preble, you mentioned the final phase. I don't know what that final phase means. I know that I was coming into this meeting hoping to get some clarity on what our options are. So I don't know if I could.
I believe in our last meeting,
here.
we were saying that we've given time, we've given more time, and during the next meeting when we met, it would be whatever the ultimate move we can make as a board in terms of the property. I don't know exactly what that is, but if we can get some clarification, Mr. Marasini. Yeah.
I see Mr. Marasini with his hand up there. Could you go forward?
You all can push for like the third citation and for things to be filed in district court. That would be like—
And that's what I appreciate you bringing that up because as I was reviewing the ordinance or the code, I was trying to see if we were at that point with the third citation where it would be referred as a criminal violation. If that third citation is not corrected, am I correct in my understanding of the code there?
You are correct. We can actually go to district court after the second citation is issued.
We're doing a
we have
disservice to others, and I know I made a motion and we're not moving on it, but the reason for my motion is that,
well, we're having discussion. We're having discussion
Sure.
on the motion.
So I guess my discussion on my own motion is that we have moved this out more and more. We've been very lenient, and we're at a point where the properties are problematic, and from what we've heard from Mr. Ardell, it doesn't sound like we're going to get any closer, short of this. So,
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Mr. Pribble. The property owners are aware of the violations, and they have made a business decision not to be responsive.
And I think I'm in agreement too. My issue, or rather my concern, is I think the motion needs to be a bit more specific, as to what that final action is. Yes.
sorry.
If I may, I believe what Mr. Pribble was trying to motion is to uphold staff's finding that the property is in violation and to assess the third citation that has a fee of $1,200 associated with it.
Yes. And if
And it was,
Is that your
was it
motion,
my,
Mr. Pribble?
was it
It
my
is.
Hold on one
understanding?
second,
I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Powell. Go ahead, Ms. Powell.
And from what our conversation was, Mr. Pribble, I thought you also wanted to proceed with referring this for prosecution.
at this point, I think we just take it to it. I don't feel that we've seen any move, and the only moves that happen are in the morning of our meetings. And from what I've heard from Mr. Ardell, I'm not convinced that anything's going to change. We're doing a disservice to our citizenry that are around that property. So if I was going to change, we can go to the third citation, but if the court proceedings are part of that, I don't know, are they handled separately, or do I make a motion for the third violation and then separately handle the court proceedings?
Corey Bellamy.
Can I just mention that Mr. Bellamy made a motion in the last meeting about if the city inspectors find that they're not in compliance, they will be fined a fee. So would that be the answer to that? And based upon inspections, they've already said basically what what Don has mentioned. They did not conform. They did not conform with Mr. Bellamy's motion to get it ready for the inspectors to look over. So that's it. I mean, let's go by what they said it was going to do, and Mr. Bellamy made it clear if it's not in compliance, the fees will be assessed, fines will be assessed. That's the third paragraph the first paragraph on the third page.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Do we even procedurally need a new motion on this?
Well, basically, he gave him heads up. He said if you don't get it done, if the inspectors don't find it in compliance, you're going to fine you. That's it.
I think legally you have to have a separate motion to impose the fine. And whether that, and I don't see why you couldn't amend that motion to include any criminal recommendations as well.
Corey Bellamy.
Go ahead.
Historically, you have the first fine, the second fine, and then it automatically goes to district court, and the board is not required to make a motion that it goes to district court. It automatically goes.
Well, I guess we don't see any action on that, so maybe we need to make another motion after we vote on this one concerning that.
Mr. Logan, do you mind speaking to that?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. I think that you know we need to vote on the motion that's been put before the board at this point in time, and then if we are going to assess another fine, I would recommend making a motion and voting on that. I would have to check on whether or not we're able. I mean, I know, I believe in the past that this has gone to prosecution without motion, and I think that we're fine doing so. But I don't have that answer 100% in front of me at this time.
Okay. Mr. Logan, it's my understanding that we're talking about the second citation on tonight. Is it appropriate to have the board review the third violation without the defendant or the property owner having the opportunity to appeal it?
Yes, I believe so.
It is okay to rule without an appeal?
I believe that we can. I mean, we've issued, you know, 2 previous citations, and you know, this has been put out quite a bit, and ample notice has been provided to this point.
All right, thank you, Mr. Logan.
Okay, we have a motion on the table that's been seconded. Ms. McDonald, could you stated well the first time, could you state Mr. Pribble's motion again?
I believe it was to uphold staff's finding that the property is in violation, to issue a third citation and assess the fine of $1,200.
And Mr. Bellamy, did you second that motion? I forget.
Ms. Powell did.
Ms. Powell, is that your understanding of what you seconded?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there
Clarification.
any further go ahead, Mr. Bellamy.
Yes, sir. I just want to confirm that the fines of $400, $800, and the $1,200 will be assessed if they have not already.
Is that part of Mr. Pribble's motion, or is that part of that going to have to be another motion that we consider after voting on this one?
I thought we'd already assessed the $400 and the $800 fine, and now we're about to assess the $1,200 fine. This motion, I believe, is the $1,200 fine.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Okay, is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, at this time, Madam Secretary, would you please take the roll? Or
Mr.
not the
Pribble?
roll, rather, but the vote.
Mr. Pribble?
Aye. Yes, sorry.
Thank you. Mr. McKee?
Yes.
Ms. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Bellamy?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Are there
I
any
would
other?
also like to make a motion that we ask staff to look into where I think after the second citation, where it is in the criminal process. If it's automatically sent to district court, I would ask the staff to just let us know at the next meeting where it sits in the criminal process.
I would have already filed in district court, but I did not because I was pending your all's meeting.
Okay, well, that answers my question. So is that an automatic thing that you'll be doing then?
Correct.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Like, the main reason I did not is because it kept being pushed to the next meeting, so I did not want to overstep.
I appreciate that.
Okay, and then I just wanted to revisit the point Mr. McKee had made about Mr. Bellamy's motion from last meeting regarding the 150 property. Is it my understanding then that pursuant to Mr. Bellamy's motion, that if the violations hadn't been remedied, that the fines would be assessed? Those fines are assessed, and that requires no further action from the board? Or do we need to take some type of action with respect to Mr. Bellamy's motion from last meeting?
Corey Bellamy here. It was my understanding that no further action was required. The vote was based on if it had not been corrected, the fine was automatically assessed.
Okay. I think that clears it up for me. All right, are there any other further motions regarding 150 or any other further discussion regarding this property? Okay, then at this time, I believe, Mr. Troxel, are you, or rather, excuse me, I'm sorry, Madam Secretary, would you please call the next item on the agenda?
The next item would be for violations and citations at 154 Landings Drive.
Okay, and Mr. Troxel, or is this your property? I mean,
Yes.
Your case. Okay. And do you have a report for the board that you'd like to give?
Yes, since the last meeting on September 1st, we issued the second citation. Then November 15th, I conducted a reinspection on the property. The rubbish has been removed. Work has begun on the soffit and fascia, and the basement hatchway crawl space door has been put in place, but all the other violations still remain. There'll be a correction on our recommendation. The third citation will actually only be 1,200 and not 2,000 because of the corrective violations.
Do any of
Was
the board
November-
members have any questions? Go ahead, Ms.
Was
Paul.
November the 15th the last time that you had looked at the property?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, was your November the 15th, was that the last time you looked at the property?
We were there again today.
Okay. Was there any change from your November 15th report to today?
Just the crawl space door.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Troxel regarding this?
I have a clarification question. So when someone boards a window on a property, what's the timing for turnaround on getting an actual window to replace that board? Is there a time frame for that typically?
12 months is what we allow, but when they're boarded, they're actually supposed to be boarded on the exterior
Next year, that's what I thought too. Okay. Thank you.
and painted to match the surrounding area.
But does this fall under Mr. Bellamy's motion of 150 and 154 of last meeting?
And to add, one unit of this building is also occupied.
Does it have a certificate of occupancy?
No, we haven't inspected any of these units.
Is that a separate issue then, not before our board, that they've allowed someone to live here without a certificate of occupancy?
We can't say when they moved in. It could have possibly been during COVID or something like that when we weren't doing inspections. So we can't enforce anything on that right now.
So right-
Let me, I can look up her lease date, but she was there prior to the purchase of the property. So I'll look up her lease and I can tell you when she moved in.
But
Mr.
again,
McKee, I'd heard you.
that meeting, that minutes in that last meeting included 154 along with 150. All I'm saying, it did not meet compliance under Ms. Bellamy's recommendation. That's all I'm trying to avoid a whole lot. Just basically, they didn't do what they said they was going to do. And based upon what we're saying, they don't actually need it. He just did not do what needed to be done.
I agree with you. And a point of clarification to that motion, I would say that there is a reduction in the fine based on the repairs made, but I agree.
Any other questions for Mr. Troxel at this time?
I do if no one else does have any.
You can go ahead and ask Mr. Troxel a question, Mr. Ardalt.
I just looked it up, and Debbie, who is in 154, she moved in April 7th, 2017. So that was prior to the purchase. So she's a holdover tenant, which is why I believe the differences in the 154 and 160 have been like they are. I guess my question, so I had met, I know Trey wasn't available, which makes it a little challenging since I know that's your building. But I had met Michael over there, and we had kind of gone through the items because as of the last meeting, I guess my understanding of the motion was that essentially it would be delayed, and then any of the items that were done would get removed. Any that weren't done would get the normal fines. So I guess I just had some questions based upon, I guess, my understanding from the last meeting. I know you had said the 306.1 and the 306.2, which were both the rubbish, those were removed. The basement hatchway, which is 304.17, was removed. I guess I was a little confused, I guess, about the only one I guess I thought would be still in violation is the 304.8 for the decorative features. So I guess I was wondering what the 302.7 I thought were the fence panels that were loose, and all those have been removed. The 304.14, I guess I was under the impression that boarding them, and I know when we met over there, you had said it was the same 12 months. And then the 304.6 for the exterior walls. I guess I thought all three of those had also been done, so I guess I just wanted to clarify what those were, or what I was missing, or because I guess my impression was just the 304.8, which is the decorative features, was the only one I guess had thought would be still in violation.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Bellamy.
at our last meeting, we asked the property owner to get with the city to discuss what needed to be done prior to this meeting. And I would like to suggest that now is not the time to have that discussion. We have a citation in front of us, and I suggest that we give the property owner an opportunity to speak to the citation that's in front of us, and we move forward.
So we
agree
met
with
over there
Mr. Bell.
September 24th. So we did meet over there, and I did go through them. And I guess at that time, my impression was that those three violations were removed. Like I said, Trey unfortunately wasn't at that meeting. It was just with Michael. And then I know there was a fire call he got. So he kind of got out of there. But I guess at that time, my understanding was that those three were removed. So I guess that's what I'm trying to clarify, because I was under the impression that those three had been dealt with at that time when we met September 24th.
Mr. Troxel, when you went to the property, you still observed violations as recently as this morning. Is that correct?
Yes. The public nuisance, accessory structures, which is the fence panels that are still attached to the building. The windows, there's still broken windows on the building. And then the decorative features, which is the soffit fascia.
The problem, Mr. Ardall, is that we're at least 6 months down the road and we're still we still have a number of violations on each of these properties, and that's most of the genesis of the board's frustration.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Corey Bellamy here. I would like to make a motion that the property owner be found in violation of the property, the nuisance code, and they be assessed a fine of $1,200. That's in addition to the 1,000 or the previous fines that have already been assessed.
I second that motion, Karen Powell.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor, or table rather. Is there any discussion on that motion? I have a question. Would this citation receive the same treatment and be referred by staff to district court as well?
Yes.
Okay. If there's no other discussion on this motion, Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll? Take the vote.
I apologize. I was muted and talking and you couldn't hear me. Mr. Pribble,
Yes.
Ms.
Voted yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Bellamy,
Yes.
Mr. McKee,
Yes.
and Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. With that, would you please call the next item of business, or next item on the agenda?
The next item on the agenda is a violation and citation related to 160 Landings Drive.
Okay. Mr. Maracini, I believe this is your property. Do you have an update to give to the board regarding the status of this property?
Yes, I was out there November 15th. And basically it's in the same state it was at the previous meeting. Boards have been placed on the inside of the windows, which still is in violation due to the glass hazard. Let me share my screen and show you today's pictures. These pictures were taken today. I just did one of the front and one of the back. So you can see the fence panel and stuff right there in the middle is still broken. Several of them are missing slats. There's still holes for like the hatchways, and which also creates building security issues. Your roofs and drainage with the gutter that's laying on the power line. Still some soffit issues. Majority of the same stuff we went in depth on the last meeting.
Mr. Maracini, can you remind me the condemnation stickers on the windows on the front, were those put in place by the city, I'm assuming?
Yes, they were. They were actually put in the windows on May 19th of 2020.
Yeah.
That was the first time they were posted. They were ripped down since then. I think the next time they were posted was shortly after we were off for COVID. So I'm going to take a guess and say around April 28th, whenever this case started back up.
And that's a separate handling condemnation on a property, correct, from the Code Enforcement Board proceedings?
Correct. It's a different case number also.
Mr. Marasini, who is in charge of the condemnation actual proceeding? Who does that?
It would actually fall under us. I would have to look up the specifics on it because we
I mean,
normally,
like, how is it enforced?
it is actually enforced by the police department as far as unauthorized people in the structure, by trespassing charges. And then pretty much like what we're doing today is a follow-up case. Whenever stuff like today's cases are completed, then typically they are livable and the condemnation will be removed after an inspection.
Thank you.
Are there any other further questions for Mr. Marasini regarding 160? Okay. Mr. Ardell, do you have anything you'd like to say with respect to 160 to add into the record that you haven't already said or brought to the board's attention this evening?
No, I mean, there was some small stuff, but in general, again, since the fines on those had been delayed, they had again kind of said deal with 150 and 154, so no.
Okay, thank you. Would any of the members like to make a motion regarding this property or have any further discussion?
Mr. McKee, remind me, was this property included in any of the motions from the previous meeting? Do you recall, or looking at it? It was not.
No, I don't. Made a motion located 160 be found in violation that its fine will be assessed. The motion was seconded.
Okay.
That's all. So again, he didn't comply with he did not correct.
Yeah, agreed.
So
Then if that motion carries here, then the motion would be to assess the fines associated to the property at 160 Landing in the amount of, I don't have the vast, $1,600.
I'll second. Karen Powell.
okay.
Was that the recommendation from staff for $1,600?
Yes.
Or not? Okay. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
I believe the staff was recommending a $2,000 fine for the third citation.
So I saw 16. Oh, I'm sorry. It's up. Yeah, you're correct. I'm sorry. I was looking at the last line.
So
2,000.
if you'll amend your motion, I'll amend my second.
Excuse me, will Mr. Marasini clarify whether or not the fine was assessed for the first and second violation?
They have been assessed $1,000 fine on citation 1, a $1,600 fine on citation 2, and the third citation would be the amount of $2,000.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so the motion, as I understand it from Mr. Pribble and seconded by Ms. Powell, is that the property owner be cited with the violations and be assessed the penalty of $2,000. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Pribble,
Yes.
Mr. Bellamy,
Yes.
Mr. McKee,
Yes.
Ms. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And then regarding these three properties, this has been our third meeting in a row addressing appeals. Are we likely to be back again with these three properties, or I see you're shaking your head no, Mr. Marasini, am I right then?
Yeah, no, only the first citation can be appealed. The reason that we're back is because it keeps getting pushed to next meeting. So after this, a third citation will be issued, which is not appealable, and it will be taken to district court.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
I have to ask the question. This
Yes,
citation,
go ahead, Mr. McKee.
when it's issued, is it issued to the owner located in Colorado, or is it going to be to Mr. Ardet? Because he seems like he's not aware of any of these actions that's taking place.
He should be aware of them because all citations are posted on the property with picture proof added to the case. And a copy is also mailed to the listed PVA address. And also recently we have learned, according to the Secretary of State's website, Chris Ardelt is actually listed as one of the representations on there, and going by the names on there, I'm guessing he is the C in the VDC LLC name.
I'm a part of the Kentucky business. As obviously I deal with all the local stuff. I am not part of the Colorado business.
Okay.
And I do have copies of all the citations. I have gotten those. So if there was a confusion, I have all the citations.
Well, who owns the property? Is it the company that's in Colorado or the company in Kentucky?
The Colorado company, but any business you're required to be registered in the state you're operating in. So
are you the service of process agent?
Essentially, yes. And again, I've worked with them separately. So the reason I was brought on was to manage the properties. Obviously, they're not at a point where they can be managed. Hopefully.
So you have no ownership interest at all in
I do not, no. No.
So we want to make sure that we continue to send, if Mr. Ardelt is the representative, to him, and also I would send it to the address in Colorado. I think that's what you said you were doing.
And that's what I believe they've done.
He is actually listed as an officer along with an entity according to Secretary of State's website. I'm looking at it right now.
I think he can be an officer, but not necessarily have any ownership interest. But again, that's beyond.
Correct. That's all, I guess, in the articles of organization is where that's all laid out. But you are correct, Karen.
Okay, is there any other, well, I don't know if it's proper, but if there's any other further discussion related to these properties from the board? Any other questions? Okay, if there's no other new business, which I don't see on the agenda, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time this evening, and thank you for your patience.